Hi, everybody. Stay hydrated. It's important. I hope you're doing well. I hope you've had a great week. Happy Friday. Let's see here. I don't know if I have anything else to say. Oh, there's a. Not only is there a full moon happening Monday, I believe, but there's a equinox. So I love that time of year, the equinoxy time of year. This one is, of course, the autumn equinox, signaling when the days start to get shorter. And yeah, I love that. I love transitions. I love gray areas. I love interpretation. And sometimes I love talking. So let me maybe dial that back and get into the music, because that's what we're here for, right? But I was saying that to say the point of, in the music that I enjoy, there is gray area, there is transitions, there are not always, there's room for interpretation, maybe is what I'm trying to say. So that actually kind of segues nicely into today's little topic, because last week, if you all remember, what we did was we had these two discrete fifths, two sets of perfect fifths, and we had arranged them C, G, E, B. And so what we did last week was, I was like, okay, let me just kind of put my hands somewhere on the piano. Let me pick a pattern and follow it. That's it. So what that pattern was last week was, we would take our top perfect fifth, beginning with this E and this B, and just move it down by half steps. Right? Our brains love patterns. They help us live. It's helped us survive for how long humans as a species have survived, is being able to recognize patterns. So we are drawn to them just as a human nature. So let's see here. So yeah, we're moving those that top set of fifths down by half steps, but we're keeping this base set of fifths playing. So we're going to keep that C and the G static while this moves. And I'm a big fan of experimentation. So, that was an experiment, to just move down by half steps. I've worked out a theory and I'm going to, test it in the lab. It's like, let's just try something. And so when you try things, sometimes you get, or usually you should get, surprising results all the time. Now, those surprising results can either be bad or they can be good. Or I guess more correctly, they could either be useful to your purpose or not useful to your purpose. But let's kind of bring it back and let's talk about that first chord, C, G, E, B. All right, we know that is a major seventh chord. It's got a 1, a 3, a 5, and a 7. Major seventh chord. We know exactly what that is because of past videos. Let's go down this next half step. This is going to be a C minor 7 chord. The difference between the minor and the major seventh chord is just that half step. So that's a C minor 7 chord. C, E flat, G, B flat, right? And that's just how I was voicing it. It could be C, E flat, G, B flat. But we're doing the two discrete fifths thing. C, G, E flat, B flat. And let's continue to go downstairs. Now that is something that we have not encountered before. What the heck is this? We've got C, G, D, and A. So obviously we know we've got two perfect fifths. That is a constant. If we are looking at this from a point where C is the root, which we are, because in the past videos you find the most consonant interval and then you find the root of that interval, and then that will be the root of your chord. And by most consonant interval, that gets back to the combination tones, that gets back to our harmonic series. So the most consonant interval is the octave. The second most consonant interval is the fifth, right? And when we've got a fifth, C, G, C is the root. So we've got two of these fifths. So we know that our C is the root of this fifth and our D is the root of this fifth. But how do I know which one is the root of the chord? Well, which one is lower? The C fifth. So we are going to examine this chord from the framework that C is our root, because in this position it is. So we've got a 1, a 5. We call that a 9. It's the second scale degree, but just within theory, we typically refer to that as a 9. Likewise, we've got this. This can either be a 13 or it can be a 6. It's the sixth scale degree. Sometimes we take it up an octave and it becomes the 13th, but it's the same tone. In the same way that this D is the second scale degree, but we really call it a 9. The 9 is much more common than a 2 or a second. The 6 and the 13, borderline interchangeable. The general rule of thumb is that if you have every other extension below it, you'll use a 13. For example, in a C major 13 chord, that would already assume that I've got C, E, G, B, D, F sharp. And now I'm throwing in that 13. So it's kind of like 13 is going to have everything on down, whereas a 6 may just be 1, 3, 5, 6. I hope that makes sense. So let's get back here. So we got C, G, D, A. So we could call this maybe like, it's close, it's really close to being a C 6, 9 chord, and that there is a 6 and that there is the 9. Typically a 6, 9 implies that there's also an E in that chord, making it a major chord with some extensions, which would sound like this. Very lovely sound. I love that sound. But that E is not there. So it becomes a little bit more ambiguous. So if I was to notate this, I would probably just write it out, spell it out, say this is the voicing for this chord. But what would happen, you know I'm all about experimenting and switching things up. We always got to flip the coin, see what's on the other side. What if we put our D in the bottom and then put the C in the, our D and the A are now on the bottom, and then we've got a C and a G up top. That's a totally different chord right there. Because following the rules of most consonant intervals, root is the root of the chord. Now our most consonant interval is this low fifth. So the root of this is going to be D. So now we've got some sort of D chord. Right? Hear the difference between flipping those in the octaves. Here's the C, G, D, A. Lovely, beautiful, spacious, open sound. It's just stacked fifths. Right? From C to G is a fifth, from G to D is a fifth, and from D to A is a fifth. Beautiful, beautiful sound. But like I was just saying, if we switch those and we got D, A, C, G, that's a totally different sound. Totally different sound. And if we were to analyze it from a D as the root perspective, it would be D, the fifth, which is A, and we've got this seventh here. Call it a minor seventh because it's a whole tone or two half tones away from D. It's a minor seventh. And then we've got this G, which is kind of a little anomaly. The G is our fourth tone in the key, or with D as a root. G is going to be the fourth tone. So it almost has a suspended feeling to it. Whenever we've got a fourths kind of started their way into music as being a substitute for the third, and it was they called it a suspension, because it's like eventually we're going to get to that third, but right now it's a fourth. The third is suspended. So, you know, to traditional harmony it would be like, right, like that's a resolution that our ears are familiar with, our ears love. But the fact that we're just leaving this here, it's a lot more ambiguous. So I don't know, you could call this like again, I would just straight up say here's the voicing, but it's some sort of D suspended seventh chord, D sus 7, maybe you could also call that. But this is why voicings are really important. It's a totally different chord if we voice it like that versus if we simply take our hands, flip them, and then play that chord again. Right? Totally different thing. I love it. It's very fascinating to me. So let's see here. We've got C major 7 to C minor 7 to some sort of C almost 6/9 chord to what the heck is this? It's very tense. That's what it is. C, G, and we got either D flat or C sharp, and either G sharp or A flat. Just those fifths right next to each other is very tense. I'll drop it down into the same octave and it will be even more pronounced. Right? It's kind of like, what the heck's going on here? So that's some sort of, I would call that maybe like a flat 9, flat 13. As being the extensions over that C to G. But again, let's do the same thing that we had just done. Let's flip these. Treble goes in bass, bass goes in treble, and now we've got this chord, which is way more harmonious to my ear. So we've got a D flat and an A flat in the bass, followed by a C and a G up top. So again, both are perfect fifths. The perfect fifth that is lower has the root note of D flat. So now we're analyzing this as some sort of D flat chord. So it's D flat, A flat, C, which is the major 7th of D flat, right? Just a half step down from a D flat, major 7. And then we've got this G, which you can call either an augmented fourth, you can call it a diminished fifth, or you could just call it a tritone. Tritone is kind of a catch-all for both of those intervals. Augmented fourth in that if the fourth of D flat is just really G flat, augmented means you add to it. So we're going to add a step to it, add a half step, so it becomes a G. Similarly, a diminished fifth, the 5 in the key of D flat is going to be A flat. So diminish means take away, so we're going to take away a half step, it becomes a G. So one more time it sounds, let's see here, D flat, A flat, C, G. That almost sounds like a D flat major chord, a D flat major 7 chord. For example, all I got to do is throw this major third in there, and that's, we know exactly what that is. That's a D flat major 7 chord. However, that third is missing, but we've got the added tritone, sharp 11, flat 5, whatever you prefer to call it. So that chord makes more sense to our ears voiced like this than switched voiced like that. That is much more dissonant. And that's, you know, that gets back into roots of intervals and roots of chords. And it's not always, you can't always just flip everything around and expect it to come out equal in the wash, you know. Notes have very specific places And when we start changing those places, our ears start to tell us, hey, this is something different. You may theorize that it's the same thing, but it's different. And that to me is fascinating. So let's see here. Let's start all over again. C, G, E, B. Down to C, G, E flat, B flat. Down to C, G, D, A. Down to C, G, D flat, A flat. Down to C, G, C, G. Let's do it again without me talking. So I hope that was cool. Kind of learning how to hear and analyze what we are playing. It reminds me of a quote. One of my friends was taking a lesson with this guitar player named Kurt Rosenwinkel. Fantastic musician. And my friend said, Kurt said that sometimes he'll just put his fingers down and play a chord and not know how it's going to sound until he has already played it. Just put your hands somewhere and say, how does that sound? And then figure it out from there. I think there's a big amount of information in that idea that sounds are their own things, and they don't need to be theorized first. We can have a beautiful sound and then figure out what it is after the fact, as opposed to having to have the theory all nice and in order and then saying that presents this sound. Kind of reminds me of the piano player Thelonious Monk. It took a while for the public to figure out what the heck was going on before they wrote down, oh, he's doing this, he's doing this, he's doing this. I think he was doing that because he liked how it sounded. And then somebody later came along and said, this is how it's justified, right? It's always like the rules are written after the experience has happened. The rules justify the experience and come after it. Having said that, there's absolutely nothing wrong with learning the rules and then creating experiences. I think the ideal is to merge the black and the white to create the gray. Again, coming back to that, I love transitions. I love gray. I love ambiguity. And I think that there's a lot of magic that lies within that. So I think it's important that we train ourselves to think about things theoretically and also to do field work and then come back and examine that from a theoretical point of view. I think it's a marriage of those two is how we get the most fruitful results. And I've been talking for a long time. Thank you for tuning in. As always, if anybody wants some private lessons, music theory, music composition, music production, whatever, hit me up. Let me know. I offer 100% money back guarantee. I would just like to help you realize the sound and the music that's in your ears. So I will leave it at that, and join me next week, 2 p.m. Eastern time on Friday for another one. Oh, and that full moon that's coming out on Monday, I will be releasing a new piece of music on Monday, and it is in just intonation, and it is tuned to A equals 432 for all you folks who like that sort of thing. All right, I will see you all next week. Have a fantastic weekend, and thank you for tuning in. Bye-bye.